Good morning. Good morning, church. It's good to see you all here today. You might not have known this about me, but I am a huge boxing fan. And in fact, there was a pretty big fight on last night, but I absolutely love boxing. And one of the reasons that I don't like boxing just because I like to see people get hurt or because I enjoy seeing people bleed or anything like that. I'm a fan of boxing because I love the competitive nature of the sport. I love the rigorous training that the athletes put their bodies through, and the strategy and the technique that's involved in defeating your opponent. I just think that boxing is an amazing skill. But when you watch boxing today, what happens? The boxers come out, all in their parades and their pomp and circumstances and accolades and all the cheering. In fact, the entrance to the ring is almost a bigger show these days than the actual fight itself. Sometimes, this was actual a fight of a boxer who came out literally with a circus. There was clowns and jesters and juggling and people doing flips and all this kind of stuff to the ring. It's a lot different than when it was like back in the day, when the great boxers of old, the greatest boxers of all time, like Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard, Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, and George Foreman, the great boxers of old. The greatest boxers of all time, when they came out to the ring in their entrance, they came out with just a trainer, a spit bucket, and a towel. That was it. They were no nonsense. They were just straight to business. They didn't care about the charades or the parades or accolades and stuff like that. They just had a trainer, a spit bucket, and a towel. And that's what the great ones of old did. In the same way, Jesus teaches us how to be great. And he taught that lesson not with parades or status or positions and pomp, but with a basin and a towel. The way to be great is not how the world seeks to attain greatness, with power and authority and charades and positions and status and accolades. Jesus says the way to be great is through service, and he uses a basin and towel. The disciples were walking along the road one day, and James and John came up to Jesus with a request. And their request was for greatness. They asked Jesus, this is what they said to Jesus. They said, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask." "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. They replied, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory." "You don't know what you're asking," Jesus said. "Can you drink the cup that I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?" "We can," they answered. And Jesus said to them, "You will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared." When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many." Mark 10:35-45. So as the disciples followed Jesus to Jerusalem, they realized that something big was about to happen. And so James and John decided to ask Jesus to sit in places of honor next to him in his glory. Because in the ancient royal courts, the persons chosen to sit at the right and left hands of the kings were the most powerful people in the kingdom. So James and John were asking for the equivalent of those positions in Jesus' court. They understood that Jesus would have a kingdom. They understood that Jesus would be glorified. And so they approached him as loyal subjects to the king. They were jostling for position and authority. They were seeking to be great. However, they misunderstood how to achieve that position of greatness. Because Jesus' kingdom is not of this world. It's not centered around palaces and thrones, but in hearts and lives. And none of the disciples understood this truth until after Jesus' resurrection. The kingdoms of the world have tyrants and high officials who lord it over people, exercising authority and demanding submission. But greatness, as defined by Jesus, it finds its clearest expression through service. Again, he says, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom. Jesus says, the way to be great, the way to make an impact in the kingdom of God is through service. In fact, that's why I came, not to be served, but to serve. Have you ever thought about how pregnant that one little verse is? That Jesus, the King of all kings, the ruler of the nations, the Lord whom God has placed all things under his feet, the creator of the universe, that he came to earth not to be served, but to serve. How prolific is that? And the way he teaches the disciples is with a basin and a towel. So let's take a look at the story together. This is from John chapter 13. You'll be familiar with it. And it reads, it was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Verse 2. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand. Verse 8. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. And Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Then Lord, Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. But Jesus answered, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, as you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him. That was why he said not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. All right. What a powerful lesson. I think what makes this lesson so powerful isn't the action that's being done, but the one who's doing the action. Because if you lived in the first century, this would have been normal for you to see. It wouldn't have been out of the ordinary for you to see foot washing, because foot washing was common in the first century because people traveled mostly on foot, and people walked around the dusty roads of Galilee and Judea in sandals. So this would have been very customary for you to see foot washing. Whenever someone entered a home, it was customary to wash someone's feet. So again, the odd thing about this lesson here isn't what's being done, but who's doing the action. Because washing feet was usually a job reserved for a household servant who would wash the feet of guests when they arrived. It was a subservient task. And so what's unusual about this act is that Jesus, the master, the teacher, He's the one doing the action. He's the one washing the disciples' feet. Jesus is doing the job of a slave. He's doing the job that the lowliest slave would do. It wasn't normal or natural for the master and teacher to engage in such a lowly task. From the world's perspective, this is not how you use a basin to achieve greatness. Which brings us to our first lesson here this morning. I believe that service is not natural, okay? I believe that service is not natural. Have you ever served someone and thought to yourself, okay, this is awkward, or this is a little weird? Have you ever served someone and they didn't know what to do? They didn't know whether to pay you or to hug you or to give you a meal or offer something for your service, right? Has that ever happened to anybody before? I think that service is not natural. It's not natural to go out of your way to mow someone's lawn in the middle of the hot summer. It's not natural to go out of your way to clean someone else's house or to bring them food. It's not natural to take off work to help someone move for free. It's not natural to go to the hospital and just sit with someone. These things are not natural, and sometimes they can feel weird or awkward. I mean, just look at Peter. Peter doesn't know what to do with himself when Jesus washes his feet. He doesn't know what to do. And look in verse 13, 6, he says, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? In verse 8, he says, you will never wash my feet. He protested. Seeing Jesus behave like a slave confused Peter, and Peter didn't know what to do. He didn't feel worthy that Jesus should be acting like a slave toward him. And this was not an expression of arrogance, but of awkwardness and confusion. Peter felt that he should be the one washing Jesus' feet and not the other way around. How awkward do you think it must have been for Jesus to wash Judas's feet? Although he knew what? Although he knew that he would betray him. Jesus already knew that Judas would be used by Satan and that this man would eventually lead to his death. And what did he do for him? He washed his feet. I think many of us can relate to Peter, including myself, because I'm the type of person that would rather serve than to be served. And so if I can really relate to Peter here, because I would be like, wait a minute, no, Jesus, what are you doing? Like, no, you can't wash my feet. You know, James and John over there, they can wash my feet, but not you, Lord. You know, service is not natural. But let me caution you that if you are like me, that you rather serve than to be served. I know that service can be awkward, and I know it's not natural. But if we don't allow others to serve us, then we rob them of an opportunity to share their spiritual gift of service. And we lose an opportunity to share in the goodness of God through them. Peter was about to miss out on his opportunity to share in the goodness of God through Jesus, through what Jesus did for him. And what I really want you to digest from this lesson is that in the book of John, John spends the first 12 chapters covering 3 years of Jesus' life. And the next 6 chapters, beginning here with chapter 13, covers just 1 day. Think about that. Think about the significance of this lesson. Because Jesus, he was fully aware that his hour had come to leave this world and return to the Father. And so he devoted his last hours to instructing and encouraging his disciples. One of the last things Jesus ever taught his disciples was how to serve, with a basin and a towel. Think about that. So what Jesus teaches us in this lesson with the basin and towel is that service is not natural because service is supernatural. Think about that. It's the reason that the God of the universe came to earth. It's why Jesus came. When we serve one another, it's one of the most Christ-like things you can ever do because it's what Jesus did and it's why Jesus came, the King of all kings. There are many kings who claim to be God, but there's only one God who claimed to be a man. And this man washed his disciples' feet with a basin and a towel. He took the role of a slave. Jesus is the model for all of us here today, and he shows us that service is not natural. Service is supernatural. It's one of the most Christ-like things you can ever do. Paul's words ring true from Philippians chapter 2, what Paul says about Jesus, that in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on the cross. Service is not natural, it is supernatural. I believe another thing that we should learn from this lesson is not only that service is supernatural, but also that service is humbling, both as a giver and the receiver. Oh, what it must have been like, what it must have felt like for the creator of the universe to wash their feet. For the very God who knitted them in their mother's womb, who formed them, who crafted every joint and ligament, was now washing the very feet that he formed. That must have been a very humbling experience. Service is humbling. And one of the reasons it's humbling is because you are honoring someone above yourself. That's what happens when we serve. Just a few verses down from the verse that Noah read for us in verse 10 in chapter 12 of Romans, Paul says, "Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves." That is what service is. It's honoring others above yourself. Back in May of 2014, I took my first mission trip to Haiti, and it was an awesome, absolutely awesome experience, life-changing. The people there were beautiful. The experience was great. It was great for me in my faith and my growth in Christ. It was a very formative trip for me. And I'll never forget one of the things that we did down there. You know, when you go on these mission trips, you often bring things with you so that you can give out to the people. Well, we brought down a lot of lotion with us. And when we did that, I didn't understand at first why we were bringing down so much lotion. But one of the things that we did while we were there is we went to a nursing home to serve the residents there at the nursing home. And I thought that we were going to go to the nursing home to sing like we do here in the States. But we went when we arrived at the nursing home. In fact, we didn't sing at all. We gave out lotion, but not just did we give out lotion, we actually lotioned the residents ourselves. Because you see, lotion is a commodity in a third world country. So this was literally my basin and towel moment. And so I got down on my knees and we lotioned those residents from head to toe, and I lotioned their feet. That was one of the most humbling things I have ever experienced in my life, a lesson that I have never forgotten. Honor others above yourselves. That's what Paul said. The Bible makes a very clear contrast between those who are not humble and those who jostle for position and authority. This is what Luke says in Luke 14:11. "For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." The act of service is humbling because we honor others above ourselves. Let me share another thing with you about service. Service is often an inconvenience also. Service is often an inconvenience. When is it ever a good time to help someone move? Because it's always either in the middle of a work week or on the weekends when it's raining, right? Cameron, when is it ever a good time to do someone's funeral? It seems like it never happens at a convenient time. When is it ever a good time to wake up at 3 a.m., parents, to change a stinky diaper, right? Service is often an inconvenience. When I worked as an apprentice at Ole Miss at the campus ministry, I had a little pocket office at the student center, and it was kind of out in the open. And so when people ever came to the student center, I was usually one of the first people that they saw because my office was out in the open. And I was always busy trying to plan our next big event or study for a Bible study lesson or just do classwork or something of that nature. And people just kept coming in and out of my office just all the time, just really disturbing me. And at first, this wasn't a big deal to me, but eventually it became kind of annoying to me because I was just always being inconvenienced by something that somebody wanted something or somebody needed something. Somebody always wanted to talk or somebody wanted information or they wanted to know something. And some people just didn't want anything at all, but just to inconvenience me, it seemed. So sometimes I would be short with them so that they would leave, or I would close my office door so as not to be bothered because all I wanted to do was just to get my work done. Until one day, I learned a very valuable lesson. And this lesson was called the statue of opportunity, or the opportunity statue. And it goes a little like this. There was a man walking down the ancient city of Athens. And as he walked down the ancient streets of Athens towards the city entrance, he observed hundreds of statues on either side of the road. And these statues were statues of the pantheon of Greek and Roman gods, just hundreds of them all the way down. There was Zeus and Athena and Poseidon and Ares and so on, just all the way down the entrance. And as the man continued to walk down, he came across a very unusual statue. It was a statue that wasn't familiar with him. The statue was a depiction of a man who had long flowing hair coming down the front of his face, but he was completely bald in the back, like Cameron. So just teasing Cameron. So the man asked, what is this statue? What is this? See, he inquired about it, and they told him, this is the statue of opportunity. And what the statue of opportunity represented was that if the man was ever approaching you, if he was ever walking towards you, then you could grab hold of his hair and take advantage of the opportunity. But if the man approached you and you did not grab hold of his hair, then you could not grab him or take advantage of the opportunity because he was completely bald in the back. And so you would have missed your opportunity. The statue of opportunity. This is the valuable lesson that I learned. I realized that in my frustrations with being frustrated with people who were inconveniencing me, I realized that I was neglecting the very people that I was there to serve. And I learned this lesson. Service is often an inconvenience, but inconveniences are opportunities to serve. Service is often an inconvenience, but inconveniences are opportunities to serve. And I love this truth. And I love this truth. I'm encouraged by thinking about many of you in this church right now who live out this truth of serving and finding opportunities to serve and to honor others above yourselves. I think about our elders who serve this church diligently and faithfully, week in and week out, without ever receiving a dime. I think about Cameron Holland, who has served this church. He's given 16 years of service to this church. I think about Miss Catherine Smith, who came out of retirement to serve this church as our administrative assistant. I think about Ralph Richardson, who has served this church for over 50 years, and all the things that Ralph does behind the scenes. I think about Miss Linda Sloop, who has taught the children's class upstairs for nearly 40 years. I think about our children's ministry leaders like Matthew and Hannah Taylor and Justin and Mary Ellen White, who do so much for our children here at this church. And Reggie Sisko and Billie Holiday and Jerry Motlin and all the things that they do. And I know that there's so many more of us who are serving and doing things behind the scene. It's such a wonderful thing to serve and to find opportunities to serve that are already happening right now in our church. And I just love this truth. This is how, another way that Paul puts it, that I really glean a lot of encouragement from the book of 2 Timothy. I want you to read this with me. He says this, "You know that everyone in the province of Asia has deserted me, including Phygellus and Hermogenes. May the Lord show mercy to the household of Onesiphorus, because he often refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chains. On the contrary, when he was in Rome," please underline this in your minds, "he searched hard for me until he found me. May the Lord grant that he will find mercy from the Lord on that day. You know very well in how many ways he helped me in Ephesus. Now, you're probably not very familiar with the name Onesiphorus, but Onesiphorus was a Christian from Ephesus, and he searched for Paul in Rome in order to bring him relief when Paul was in prison. And Paul honors him by commending him to Timothy. Unlike Phygellus and Hermogenes, who deserted Paul, Onesiphorus was not ashamed of Paul's imprisonment. What I love about this text and what I find so remarkable about this text is that Rome was a city of 1 million people. Okay, that's more people than here in Memphis. 1 million people. Paul's in prison. Onesiphorus searched the city without any modern technology or communication, without Siri, without Google, without a GPS, and he found Paul in a city of 1 million people. That's remarkable. What an inconvenience that must have been for him to try to find Paul in a city that large. But he found him, and he gave him some relief in a city of 1 million people without any modern technology. That's service, y'all. That's what Christ-like service looked like. Onesiphorus took his basin and his towel, and he honored Paul. And who knows, maybe the reason that we even have the book of Romans today is because of the service from Onesiphorus. Who knows? Service is often an inconvenience, but inconveniences are opportunities to serve. And so we need to be people who get by with being inconvenienced, because we understand that when we serve, we're not just serving the person, we are serving Christ. My service is for God's greatest honor. My service can point someone to Jesus. My service can move mountains in the kingdom of God. My service is greatness. This is what greatness looks like. You see, the world teaches us the way to be great is not through service. Service, they say, is for the underclass or for the marginalized and the lowly. But think about this. Think about the person who has served you the most. Who is the person who has served you the most? For most of us, it's probably your mama, right? Our mamas have probably served us the most. Now, let me ask you, do you think more of your mama or less of your mama because she served you? We think more of our mamas, right? Because of her service and her sacrifice and the love and how she's honored us and just served us time and time again. And so for our children who are here today, if you want to be great, if you want to do great things in this world, then learn how to serve. Learn how to honor and place people above yourselves. Learn how to serve and start by serving your parents and serve your siblings. If we refuse to serve and think service is just too low for us, it's just beneath us, then I think that's proof that we haven't fully understood the magnitude of Jesus' arrival on earth. If we refuse service, because it's who Jesus is and is why he came. I wanna close this way. In Matthew 27, you'll remember when Jesus goes before Pilate, he's about to be crucified. Pilate stands before the crowd, and he's speaking to them. The crowd is shouting out to Pilate, crucify him, crucify him. And Pilate is saying, what do you want me to do with this Jesus? And this is what Pilate said in Matthew 27, verse 24. When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. I am innocent of this man's blood, he said. It is your responsibility. So Pilate, he took a basin and he washed his hands and he proclaimed himself innocent. And in doing so, we see that Pilate was concerned about his own power, his own authority, his own reputation. Pilate viewed himself, his title, his status, and his position more important than the innocent Jesus. And so from the world's perspective, this is how you use a basin to achieve greatness. From a world's perspective, you use it to look out for yourself, for your own interests, your own status, your own position, and your own authority in life. This is how the world uses a basin. But on the other hand, in John 13, Jesus shows us how to properly use a basin. not for yourselves, but to serve others. So as we close this morning, I'll leave you with by asking you this question: how will you choose to use the basin? For yourself or for service? What is the basin and towel for you today? How can you serve in your own life, and how can you serve in the church with the basin and the towel? You know, soon the disciples would be sent out to be messengers of the gospel, of the good news of Jesus Christ. And they had a lot of growth and learning to do along the way. You know, they were jostling for position and authority, right? They wanted to be great, but they didn't know how to do that in the right way. And I think that the disciples really needed to learn this lesson for the task that was ahead of them, to be able to serve in the church and to witness about the good news of Jesus Christ. I think about the importance of this lesson and the necessity that the disciples needed to learn this important lesson of serving the church and not seeking to jostle for a position and authority in the church. That this was an important lesson for them and what Jesus has asked them to do. And I'm thankful that they took this lesson to heart. They all learned how to serve, and they shared that throughout the gospel books that we see. So if you want to take this lesson to heart this morning, if you want to become a servant of Jesus today, you can do so. You can be immersed, you can be baptized and have your sins forgiven. You can put on Christ today. If you're ready to be a servant of Jesus, or if you have any need whatsoever, please, why don't you come as we stand and as we sing.